Welcome to another episode of the Ignite Your Mind podcast, a safe place for real talk on discovering powerful stories, talking about mental health, real business journeys, and hearing inspiring stories. My name's Sanjay Patel, and I'm a transformational life coach. And this week, I have another special guest. That's Sarah Sewell, CEO from an amazing charity called Yes Futures. I volunteered personally for Yes Futures for the last couple of years, and I know firsthand how much impact Yes Futures has not just made on me as an individual, but the students involved. Sarah talks us through her journey from growing up as a young girl, getting bullied in school, how she dealt with it, why this really happened, then moving forward to her passion, where she was really challenged as a teacher, but subsequently always knew the bigger picture and the real impact it did make on the students. This is a truly inspirational story that got me emotional. I hope you enjoy. Okay, and welcome to another Ignite Your Mind podcast. Myself, Sanjay Patel, and again, I come with a very, very special guest, and I'm super excited to have Sarah with me, who is the CEO of a charity called Yes Futures, which I've been involved in for a couple of years now. So, of course, I had to get her on. Sarah, how are you?
Hello, I'm great, thank you. Thanks, Sanjay. I'm very excited to be on here. This is my first ever podcast. Maybe the first of many. My team are telling me that I need to get on lots, so we'll see about that. See how this one goes.
Well, I'm glad I've got you to pop your podcast cherry.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm in the garden, so we've got building work going on inside my house, so I've been forced out here, but it's a lovely day, and maybe you can just about hear the birds in the background as well.
I can hear some birds tweeting, so you might find that goes through the whole conversation, guys. So yeah, it's not a bad sound though. It's a lot worse. Could have a lot worse.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, look, the reason why I've asked Sarah to come on, mainly because I've known you for a good few years now, through Yes Futures and obviously what you do, which we'll get onto that. But I really want to, if anyone's listened to any more podcasts, or know I'm all about inspiring journeys, why you do what you do today. And just really sort of go into detail about you as an individual. So let's start. Take us back, Sarah. What was it like for Sarah growing up when you were a child?
So this is a really interesting question because it was very mixed.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had an incredibly supportive family, but I also had quite a disruptive family life in my early years. My biological dad left my mum, and she was a single mum for a while before my stepdad came along. And I spent some time with my grandparents, and I had lots of love and support from my aunties and uncles around. But I think having not growing up in those early years in a very specific standard family dynamic meant that firstly, I was really quite adventurous. I spent a lot of time, sleeping in different beds and going to lots of places with different people. So it grew that sense of kind of security with a wider group of people and in a wider setting than I suppose most 3-year-olds would be used to.
Yeah.
And that absolutely, I think, has formed kind of some foundation in my personality of how independent I think I became at quite a young age. But despite that, like I said, I had an extremely supportive upbringing as well, and I was always encouraged to do very well at school, and I've had loads of amazing opportunities that so many young people don't have. I was able to go on summer camps every year. I was like part of Brownies and Girl Guides, and I made loads of friends through that. And I had this really, really rich life around personal development alongside my schooling. And I suppose it was only when I got older that I really appreciated that, and appreciated that so many young people don't have that. They just have school and home, and that's it. And I did so many kind of different extracurricular activities, like gymnastics, and my mum would make a big effort to make sure that my summer holidays were filled with visiting museums, or staying with my grandparents who would take me to see shows at the theatre and stuff like that. So I just kind of realised how lucky I was with my family side. school was interesting as well. I had a really mixed experience there, because for quite a lot of secondary school I was bullied quite badly.
Right.
And you know,
How old were you when this happened?
I was probably, I mean, all throughout secondary school, really, I was never in the popular crowd.
Right. Yeah.
And all of my friendship group were kind of regularly picked on, or dismissed by other kids.
Mm.
But I think probably the worst times were like age 13, 14, like year 8 and year 9, when I remember quite a lot of when I look back on it, quite harrowing things. I got quite a lot of physical abuse. I got pushed into filing cabinets. I had one episode where a girl who'd actually left our school, she'd been excluded, but she came back into school and I didn't even know who I was, but chose me as her target, and had an awful episode of her beating me up in the bike sheds, and she pulled out like streams of my hair, and the police got involved, and I had to give statements and things like that. And that was year 9, I remember, because that was just before a science mock exam that we were supposed to take, and my school had said, Sarah, you don't have to do the exam, you've just had this like awful thing happen to you the day before, and been up quite late with the police coming around. And I was like, no, I'm gonna do the exam. I'm not letting like someone else stop my education and what I want to do. So I think it makes me think about resilience, which, as you know, is a big factor at Yes Futures. And I think I somehow had that built in. I was able to withstand a lot of those horrible experiences because I had other stuff in my life, and because I knew I was valued through other things in my life. Like, it wasn't just about school and popularity, which it is so often for so many teenagers. For me, I knew I was valued with my family. I knew I was popular at my gymnastics club. I had those other things to hold on to, even when school was really rough and difficult to go. And that to me is just absolutely foundational around self-esteem, and knowing that somebody else's opinion of you is only an opinion, and being able to put that to one side and focus on the value that you do have, and your own goals.
So do you think that you being bullied and how you dealt with it back then, do you think this is a representation of the way you were growing up and the way you were treated earlier before you dropped into secondary school? Do you think, like you just said about, I was resilient, I wanted to take that exam, I wanted to go forward, I didn't want to stop? Do you think that was because of the way earlier in your days you grew up and how you were treated around family and your aunties and things like that, you said?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I had that like self belief brought within me. I didn't kind of need it from other people, because I had it from my family, which I'm so grateful for. But I also think it's about understanding what was happening, and I think I was really lucky as well that from quite a young age, my mum mostly, who was my kind of main upbringer, for want of a better word, she would like sit me down and talk to me about things like bullying, and she would say to me that the people who bully often have really low self-esteem themselves, and they'll have issues going on in their lives, and they take them out on other people because that's their way of coping with what's going on. So I think I was kind of really aware that even as a 13-year-old, 14-year-old myself, I was really aware that like some of the girls who were picking on me, I knew that it wasn't really about me. I knew that it was really about them, and I kind of had that internal monologue set from a young age of like, you know, it's them that's got the low self-esteem in this situation. That's why they're doing it. And yeah, and I think actually it enables me now to look back and think of that one girl, for example, the bike shed story, and I learned later that a couple of years before, she had lost her mum to cancer. And so, you know, as an adult, when I look back on that, I can think, well, she must have been having an absolutely awful time as a teenager. And, you know, and then it's not excusable, but it helps me, you know, in my adult self that has been a teacher since, and that's worked with lots of young people. It helps me to appreciate that actually, it was her that needed the most support in that bike shed in that moment, not me. You know,
isn't that funny though, when the way you look at it, you're looking at it from a completely different angle, which a lot of kids are, though, at that age wouldn't. They would think it's on them and it's their fault, and it's lacking, you know, their self-confidence and their self-esteem. They're the ones that are, you know, are not doing the right thing. So it's interesting you say that. I think, what would you say now, because obviously you've grown up, like you've been through all of this, you're doing what you're doing now. What would you say now to parents, more so than the kids that would be in that situation?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I have to be careful because I'm not a parent, you know, and I have absolutely no appreciation of how challenging it is, really. I've been a teacher and I've worked with thousands and thousands of teenagers, but I don't really know what it's like to bring up a child. And I think therefore my advice like has to come really from my own experience of parenting, which is like having those really adult conversations and helping the child to unpick the situation from as objective a view as possible. But within that, I think also what is critical is not dismissing, of course, not dismissing that the child's experience of if it's bullying, or if it's anxiety about school, or if it's just low self-esteem in however it manifests itself, like really validating that child's experience. And I think that that's something I've definitely learned along the way. It's like how crucial it is. But at the same time as that validation, it's also the process of, okay, so what tools does this young person need right now to be able to handle it? And we just talk about bullying, for example, because that's what we started on. Then I think that that learning of, you know, a bully is somebody who has their own issues, and it's fundamental to somebody who's being bullied, understanding of what's going on and helping them understand how little it is to do with them.
There was something you said a moment ago, and I can completely resonate with this one, because actually one of the programs I did with Yes Futures, there was one child in particular, and it was the point where they felt they were getting picked on or bullied, and they came to me for comfort. But what they really wanted was for me to actually listen with intent and then give them guidance, rather than saying, I'm not really listening to what you're saying, I'm just going to tell you what to do. And it was something what you just said, like really actually being empathetic with them and listening to them and treating them like an adult, because that's kind of what they want, right? That's especially that age. And I remember I did that with that student in particular, and it completely changed her mindset straight away, from like, I'm actually not really getting picked on, I shouldn't really look at it like that. It was like, I should look at it in this whole different way. And actually they ended up getting on really well for the rest of the weekend. But so I fully agree with you on that. And I think that's a massive thing, especially with kids, just from what I see, in my opinion, kids growing up these days, sometimes it is hard, and there is things, but the best thing is they need to speak up, they need to speak out, but they need to be welcomed into that environment where they can do that, right? Which I don't think they get so much, especially if they're getting bullied or getting picked on or something like that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
you know, and I'm talking about it really in a really kind of simplistic way, because of
yeah,
course there's often so many different emotions that come alongside that, and
absolutely.
it's so difficult to talk about something when your self-esteem is may already be quite low, and actually it's really easy to become a victim and to act as a victim.
Absolutely.
um and yeah, I do think there's I read a really good book. I'd recommend it to anyone, called The Choice by Edith Eger.
I'm gonna write that
It's
down.
she's amazing. She's a Holocaust survivor who was a teenager during the time of the Holocaust, and
Yeah,
her story itself about the Holocaust is probably only about a third of the whole book, because the rest of it is about um, how she survived, and she went to live in America, and she trained to become a psychologist so she could support other people who have gone through like crisis experiences in their lives to overcome
wow.
those things. And she talks much more eloquently than me about the idea of making a choice around your situation. And you know, the only person who can change how you respond to a situation is you. And you
Yeah,
can choose to be in a situation and feel victimized by it, and then become victimized by it, or you can choose to be in a situation and feel victimized by it, because you might quite rightly be the victim, but
mhm,
then choose to act in a way, or you know, change your response to it, so that you can actually, you know, move past it. um
absolutely.
yeah.
That's great. I love that. And there's another book which I'll just drop in as well. It's called Crazy Good by Steve Chandler. It's called The Book of Choices.
Mm,
It really just goes into detail about how like people can't see, they're so blindsided because they don't think they've got that extra choice, but they actually have. And when you look at it and just shift the way you look at things, like it can make a transformational change, as I like to call it.
yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. So moving through up into young adult life, what were you doing then when you left school? What was your plan? What did you get up to?
Oh, I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Not many,
And
not many of us do. I don't really still know what I want to
yeah, I
do.
know,
I'm
I still
34 years
say that to
old.
people whenever I talk to teenagers making big choices about
Yeah, yeah,
GCSEs or what they should do next or whatever. I'm like, don't worry, I still don't know what I want to
yeah.
do.
Absolutely.
Uh, um, yeah, so I got the advice from a teacher to just focus on doing what I was good at, because no, sorry, the other way around, to focus on doing what I enjoyed, because
Yeah.
then I would
Okay.
naturally be good at it. Not the good
Yeah.
at thing. So, and actually that was interesting in itself, because it meant that I went on to college and I did A levels, but I chose subjects that perhaps weren't actually my absolute strengths. You know,
Yeah.
I'm probably naturally a very logical person, and I did very well in like maths and science at
Okay.
school. And I did better in those subjects than I did in English and humanities. But I loved English and I loved humanities, and I loved any kind of topic that was about debating or analysing. And so yeah, so I chose to do a load of humanities. I did English language, like a linguistics, and then I did psychology, I did philosophy, and then that took me on to university, and I studied philosophy and linguistics at university. Um, and all through that, I just had no idea still what I wanted to do. I was just
Yeah.
living on this really great, really great advice I still give to young people now,
Yeah.
of like, just do what you enjoy. Because what's the point in living life if you're not enjoying it along the
100%.
way, you know?
Agreed. Yeah.
So yeah, and you know, I don't really do anything to do with philosophy or linguistics
Yeah.
now, but it set me up for being a good thinker, for recognizing the value of good communication. And I think I do use both of those skills regularly in, you know, in my role now. So yeah, that was kind of my journey beyond.
Do you know what's interesting about this conversation so far? We'll get to this in a moment. If people know like either myself or Sarah or are affiliated with Yes Futures, you're kind of dropping in the pillars, the four pillars, the four values slowly but surely. I love that. I love that, which is really good because it's obviously what you stand for at Yes Futures, right? And what you really go into detail with the students with. So, okay, cool. So, what was it like working through your 20s? What were you doing? Sort of what jobs were you doing? I know you did a teacher role at some point. What were you doing there?
Yeah, so I became a teacher.
Yeah.
I became an English teacher in a secondary school in West London, and it was part of the Teach First programme, which, if any of your listeners have heard of Teach First, it's a charity. They focus on supporting kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, and they place teachers in challenging schools in areas of disadvantage.
Right.
And I was in the 2009 cohort, which sounds like
Yeah.
such a long time ago now,
It
but
does.
feels like only yesterday in
Yeah.
some ways. And I was placed, in a school in West London. And Teach First is a really interesting model, because they give you 6 weeks of training, and
Right.
then they throw you into a school, and you
So
learn on the job.
when you said about the students, what type of students were they?
So it was a school in a really disadvantaged community.
Yeah.
And they were secondary students, so aged 11, well, all the way through to 18.
Okay.
And I was teaching English. So I would, because English was a core subject, I would teach all of my students every day. Which was great, actually. I thought it was the best compared to a subject with much less contact time, because it meant I got to know fewer students, but I got to know them really, really well.
Yeah. So you saw the same students every day?
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't going from different classes to different teachers and things like that? It was just...
No, yeah, they would go to different lessons, but they always had English every day.
Okay, with you. Okay, that's quite nice. I like that. Okay.
Yeah. It was just a quirk. I mean, most schools do a lot of English in the timetable, but our school had, you had 5 hours of English a week once a day, and as a kid. So and more if you were doing GCSEs. So I taught in a school which was a really fascinating experience. I mean, it was hugely developmental for me, because I graduated. I'd done a bit of traveling and spent some time working in a local authority in like a kind of stopgap job there, where I'll do a little skip back, because it is kind of relevant to where I ended up. So when I graduated, I spent some time working for the City of York Council. I went to university in York, and I just got a job there because I was desperate to stay in York. I wanted to stay with all my friends.
Really?
And,
Oh no, yeah. I get that.
And I loved my time at university. So I got a job there for about 6 months, where I was in their youth, like working on youth engagement projects within the broader department, which was called the Neighbourhood Management Department. And from what I understand, it's a relatively unusual thing for a local authority to have. Like, it was a department that focused on planting flowers in the local gardens and running like community events. It was just the most lovely thing. But it also had a whole stream of working with young people. So it was a great experience for me, because I had until that point been doing things like I ran a girl guide group when I was at university, and I became a summer camp leader after all the summer camps I'd experienced as a child. I became a summer camp leader. So I had little snippets of working with young people and knew I enjoyed it, but that role really solidified for me that I want to do something with young people for my career. So that's what led me into being a teacher, I think, and knowing that it would be good for me to experience the education system, even though, if I'm honest with myself, I didn't think I would be a teacher full time. I deliberately chose that Teach First program, because it's set up to allow you to qualify as a teacher, and you commit 2 years, and then they support you if you want to go into other careers after that. So that's why I did that program instead of like a traditional teacher training route.
Did you find that challenging at all?
Oh yeah, hugely challenging, because so it was 6 weeks of training, and then suddenly at the age of I was 22, and And I was just suddenly responsible for the education, especially and the English education, a critical GCSE as well, for about 120 children.
Wow.
And it was mad because I was in a school that was pretty dysfunctional. It had been in special measures. The head teacher in that school has changed about 5 times since I was there. And there was very little kind of leadership support, and the behaviour was extremely challenging. So it was one of these schools that had a bit of a reputation behind it, even within the circles of Teach First, where everybody who is involved with, well, especially at that point when Teach First was much smaller, everyone who was involved with Teach First knew that they worked with challenging schools. But you would say the name of my school and people would have kind of raised their eyebrows that little bit higher and go, oh, okay, good luck.
You know about that, right? Okay, could you give us an example of like a scenario that might have been really challenging with like the kids or the students at one time?
Oh, I can give you so many. Within about 3 weeks of teaching, I had a kid at the back of my classroom set fire to a table, and then proceed to jump out of the window. Luckily, we were on the ground floor. Jump out of the window, run around the school outside.
How did he set fire to it?
He had a lighter in his pocket.
He just literally. Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Set fire. I mean, it wasn't like massively ablaze, but the yeah.
Wow. Okay.
All kinds of ridiculous stories of like some really gross things as well.
Go on, tell us a gross one.
Am I allowed to on the podcast?
Yeah, go on. Share one of them. Keep it clean though, but share it as best you can.
Well, I think it's scientific enough. Well, yeah, one occasion I had a present left for me on my desk, which was a pile of pubic hair from one of the students. So that was an interesting phone call home.
Did you know which kid it was?
I worked it out eventually.
You worked it out, okay.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And yeah, they got into.
That is horrible. That is not nice.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I don't know how you guys do it. Yeah.
Lots of ridiculous things. I mean, but but my stories are kind of quite tame compared to some of my friends who were also doing the same thing, and it would become a bit of an initiation really of becoming a teacher to have those terrible moments. Stories. But amongst those kind of more ridiculous ones, there was just daily challenges, daily episodes of kids swearing at your face, of kids storming out of the class, sometimes physical abuse. Like I got pushed down the stairs by a student at one point. I had one episode where one of my students just had a complete meltdown in class once, and was kicking and screaming and pushing things all over the place, and I had to take all of the other 30 kids out of the classroom into the corridor to make sure that they were safe. To be able to deal with them. And and the thing to say about all of this is that I very quickly realized that this behavior, it's nothing to do with the young people. It's all to do with what they've been taught and the kind of lack of support that they have. And it is the fault of the education system and the management of a school that where there's that much inbuilt systemic poor behavior. There's always a handful of students that want to push the boundaries, but
of course.
So it's for me, working in that school, teaching English was one thing, and of course was important, but it became more and more apparent to me that for so many of those young people, it was about much more than that. And the biggest gift that I could give them was not how to analyse a Shakespeare sonnet, but actually it was how to communicate effectively how they were feeling, and to recognize what values they had within themselves, and how great they were at certain things that maybe aren't recognized by the education system. And as you've I'm sure you can guess, I just became like more and more adamant that that needed to be the purpose of education first and foremost. And I started to get quite frustrated actually that I was, you know, I kind of was in this structure and system where I had to, especially like with my year 10 year 11s with the GCSEs, like I had to get through the poetry anthology. I had to get that piece of coursework on the Hound of the Baskervilles done, and it's kind of so much to go through. And I'm thinking, okay, this, you know, this has some real value to the world to learn about these things, but actually right now for those 10 students in my bottom set year 11 class, like they don't, the learning about the Hound of the Baskervilles is not going to set them up for life. Like I need to be teaching them how to use sentences and full stops correctly, how to write a CV, and how to believe in themselves. And that's what I really, you know, I tried to do that as much as I could in amongst all of the requirements. But that's ultimately why I decided I had to like go about helping young people in a different way from being a teacher, because I wasn't ever going to be able to have like the significant impact that I wanted to have when I was restricted by doing a job of being an English teacher and, you know, having to get 100%. Students through their GCSEs. I just realized that wasn't really my passion anymore.
Do you know what, like anyone that's listening to this that is not a teacher would probably think I would not want to do that. But then you started going into why and actually what the kids actually need and your passion for the kids, and it kind of all makes sense, right? So I mean, hats off to teachers. I know it's not an easy job. I remember when I was a kid, I was a nightmare. Like I actually set light to a biology work desk with a Bunsen burner.
There you go, Sanjay.
Yeah, I was one of those. I was always just messing about. Like, oh yeah, it was a nightmare. But so yeah, hats off to like teachers and being able to be that resilient as well, doing that like day in, day out, and just, you know, keep going, being pushed down the stairs, like having the language thrown at you like 24/7. It's got to be quite brutally, you know, grueling, but at the same time you look past that, like you just said, you see the bigger picture, and you see what the actual kids need and why they need it, and what they actually really need, not just, you know, learning about Shakespeare, because is that going to help them when they're older? Some kids yes, some kids no, right? So thanks for explaining that. I think it's testament where testament's due. All right, so let's get on to the big one, the reason why we're here and why Yes Futures. Tell us first of all, when you first thought of Yes Futures, the name, what you were going to do and how you were going to do it.
Oh wow, that is a big question in one go.
It is. We got time. Let's go into it.
So I think the idea evolved. It took some time to bring itself to light in my head, because actually even when I was at uni, I was really interested in starting my own organization, and that's at that point in time I was like looking at starting a business, and you know, the only kind of stuff out there was about traditional enterprise, and I did some enterprise competitions and things like that, and then but I also had this real passion for young people, as I've mentioned, and so as I like went out and started my career, I wanted to try and combine the entrepreneurialism and the real like kind of natural craving for adventure and independence that I have with this passion for young people. And as a teacher, I was doing quite a lot of extra stuff, as I kind of alluded to, and I started to do some after school classes, and they evolved into doing some after school trips, because I just really, really wanted to support these young people with their personal development. And that it was one particular group, actually. It was I've mentioned them already, my bottom set year 11 class, who I had them in year 10, so I took them for the whole GCSEs. They were an incredible group of young people who drove me up the wall for the first term that I taught them, but eventually just built really, really great relationships with. But these were 15-year-olds that didn't know how to write sentences properly, that had reading ages of about 5.
Wow.
And were set to get, their predicted GCSE grades were all Fs, Gs. They were just set to not to get any kind of level of recognized passes in their
Real
exams.
challenge right there.
Yeah, real challenge as a teacher, and real challenge for them as individuals to overcome kind of the expectations that had already been set of them. And I realized that, one of them, for example, was clearly dyslexic, and no one had ever diagnosed it he got all the way to year 10 and no one had diagnosed that he was dyslexic. And I was glad actually to have been able to recognize that and get some support in place in time for his exams, so he got the extra time and things that he should have got, as other dyslexic students get.
So who would normally diagnose that? Who would be the person?
Well, so you just would have thought it would come up in their education, that at primary school their teacher would have picked it up. And it's probably in part because this boy just didn't really ever do any work as well. So probably but
it could have been
actually
a number of things then, maybe not just him.
I think it's really, the answer is that he was experiencing education in schools that weren't very well run, where staff turnover was extremely high. It was very, very common for them to have 5 teachers a year for one class.
So you had quite a lot of inconsistency with like the faces, because makes sense.
And anyway, so I took this class out every Tuesday. After we had a double English lesson, and then after that we would go out to like a local activity centre, and we did canoeing, and then the next week we did rock climbing. And it was just amazing, because these were kids who I'd managed to build a really good relationship with, but still were a nightmare to many teachers in school, who had rock bottom self-esteem, who if they produced one paragraph of work in a week, that would be a miracle. And when you saw them in this different setting, they were just completely different human beings. They were supporting each other. I remember this one moment where one of the students, who was quite quiet and shy, actually, definitely not a behaviour challenge, but definitely really low self-esteem, and in my class, who, because he had done canoeing once before and none of the others had ever stepped foot in a canoe before, he suddenly felt this kind of sense that he knew what he was doing and that he could help the others, and he just materialized into this incredible leader who was supporting them and telling them how they should move the oars. And oh my goodness, it was just amazing. And I said to the boy afterwards, has anyone ever told you that you're an incredible leader before? And like he couldn't understand why I was saying that. And I was like, you've just shown so many incredible skills of leadership. I think you could run your own organization one day. And that was like a complete shift in him. The next day in class, and from then on, he would put his hand up in our lessons.
No way.
he suddenly brought his coursework in, all of this. And it was that just that kind of one moment. And I know it's not that simple, it's not that easy with every young person.
No.
But giving them an opportunity to be in a different environment and having that sustained over a period of time as well, just allowed there to be that opportunity. And many of them developed through that. They perhaps didn't have quite that transformation of that one day for that one student, but so many of them developed their ability to communicate better with each other, their confidence in themselves. I was able to apply what they were, what they had done the day before with up the rock climbing wall to the learning in class the next day, and it just helped their engagement so much, and crucially their self-belief. And I was absolutely delighted when that class got their results back, and even though it's hardly an achievement for a lot of young people, they all beat their predicted grades. We had so I said they were predicted F's and G's. None of them were predicted above an F grade, and none of them got an F grade. They all got E's, D's, and one of my students got a C.
No way.
Which was just, oh my god, yeah, like, you know, it was like 10 years ago now, but it makes me so
me happy you just telling that story. I'm like, because I could picture it, like let alone you being there doing it and seeing the growth and seeing the changes, and then obviously being predicted one thing, then having the result of something completely different.
Yeah, just so much better than anyone ever expected of him. And the most incredible thing about that as well was he managed to get a C in maths. So he got a C in English and a C in maths, and that meant that he could get into the police force, which is what he really wanted to do.
No way.
And oh yeah, and he just became, you know, this from a kid that 2 years before was he wasn't the one that set fire to the table, but he could have been, let's put it that way, to become like this incredible human being that worked his socks off, got the C's that he totally deserved, and then went on to be a police officer. And
I mean, Sarah, let's talk about this for a moment. Let's talk about this, because you've brought me some memories and stuff like that. I mean, look, what's your views? This is just your opinion and my opinion. We don't know exactly what's right and wrong, but you've obviously been in the industry, you know what's going on. So these days, right, what do you think, like, because hearing that, like having that student have those breakthroughs, like where would you have seen that student now if you hadn't been there to fill that resource and, you know, put them in that environment? Like, where do you think that would have happened, and how important is that now, especially at that age where they're so susceptible? They're like a sponge, and they're looking at what other kids are doing. Like, where do you think that kid would have been now?
Yeah, I mean, oh my goodness, who knows? And I don't want.
I mean, we don't know, obviously, but
you just don't know what the difference is, because maybe he would have, you know, retaken some GCSEs next year, and maybe he would have got there eventually. But actually, the chances are probably not, because for so many young people, like, their GCSEs is their only chance, and it is extremely challenging just from a personal self-belief point of view to go back and do them again if you haven't passed them. And you know, schools are so much better even in the last 10 years. When I was a teacher, at keeping kids on and supporting them, especially because in that time it became compulsory for kids to be in some form of education until the age of 18. So there is that kind of extra bit of time to catch the kids up. But what you can't ever really catch up is the loss of self-esteem. And this is actually why, you know, I think about that class, and I just happen to have centered on that story for our conversation. But I actually just believe that I probably could have done so much more if I taught them from year 7. And this is why at Yes Futures, we work with year 10s and year 11s, but we really try and focus on key stage 3, so year 7, 8 and 9, and key stage 2 as well. So that's why we started running our program in primary schools as soon as we possibly could. We started offering our work to primary schools, so that we could work with kids, you know, like you say, when they're still a sponge, and when they haven't had so many patterns of like ingrained in their minds about the way they should be, or what kind of person they are. You can still rewrite a lot of that if you get to a young person early enough. And then that means that you can, you know, just looping it back, I mean, I definitely don't think I was a brilliant example of being a resilient, confident teenager, but I do think I was more resilient and confident than average, and I think that is because from a really young age I had that self-esteem built in me, and just having that has made me be able to make choices and be able to respond to really difficult situations. And my absolute, obviously, mission in life is to provide that to many, 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 many more young people, so that, you know, if they get bullied at school, if they don't pass their exams, if they struggle with some mental health challenges, if they have a family crisis, whatever might happen, that they're able to keep centered, to keep that self-awareness up, and to be able to get through that with their self-esteem intact.
Boom. Power punches. Do you know what? I fully agree, and I can, because I've been obviously involved in Yes Futures, I can fully see what you're talking about. But if anyone's listening to this that probably can't or hasn't been in that situation, I like the way I look at it. This is like, imagine you're a child and you've got this long lane and you're just going up it, and that's you growing older every year. Like what it looks like you do is that these children are on these lanes, they're on these pathways to grow up, but you just come in and interject, like when they're children or when they're really susceptible, primary or secondary, and just take them down another lane, which is going to massively, completely change their life. But they have to obviously be willing to do it. But, you know, like that student who showed leadership, he was able to do that. But you interjected and actually put him in that different environment where he could do that. And if they haven't got that, and this is one reason why I volunteered for Yes Futures, because I never had that when I was younger. I never had anything like this. And to just go and see this firsthand and see these, and I've experienced it with some of the students I've had through Yes Futures. They've had a massive change, especially on those Into the Wild weekends. Like huge impact it makes in them, which can really spiral them into a different life that they actually maybe really want to do. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think, just to take your analogy a step further, I think for me it's about interjecting in that path, coming along and saying, hey, guess what, there isn't just this one path here, you're at a junction, and you can choose path A, path B, path C, path D. You can make your own path up. You know, it's actually about saying to them, there are all of these opportunities, and if they still choose with that knowledge, if they still choose the path they were on, great, absolutely fine. At least they have done that with that knowledge. But, you know, what we know for so many disadvantaged young people is that path tends to lead to employment where they're not making the most of their skills. It tends to lead to mental health challenges. For some extremely disadvantaged young people, it leads to prison. You know, there are patterns that happen in our society again and again, and they are so linked to your upbringing and to the level of advantage that you have, what school you go to, what area you grow up in. And if you can interject and just rock the boat and shake that up and allow that young person to see that they don't have to be part of those patterns, then, you know, that is, to me, is like the critical foundation of a socially mobile society. It has to be starting at that young age.
100%. You explained that very well, and completely understand and agree with that. So tell us a little bit more. Okay, tell us what Yes Futures is. I know we spoke about it, but tell us what it is, what you actually do. Like, explain to the people just so they can understand why you do it and why I'm involved in it.
So Yes Futures is the best charity in the world.
It really
of course.
is. It really is.
So Yes Futures, we work with primary and secondary schools. So like I've said, I really am passionate about supporting young people as early as we can. And we work with targeted groups of students who've been identified by their school because they might be struggling with self-esteem, they might be struggling with resilience, they might come from a disadvantaged background. Could be a number of different reasons, but all of whom have been chosen because their teachers see that they've got real potential and they could really benefit from, you know, that interjection that we've just talked about. So when we have that group of young people, we work with them for a year, and the first 6 months of that is really intensive. So they all get a coach like you, Sanjay, who is the absolute
lucky sods, eh?
They are extremely lucky if they get you. And the coaching is the glue of the program. It's the opportunity for the students to sit down with an adult who takes 100% attention, like, in them, which is so rare for so many young people to get that, and who helps them to identify their own goals, their own strengths, helps them to have that process of self-reflection and to see how they can lead their own personal development. So that is why we use coaching. It's really about empowering the young person. Our coaches are not mentors, because they don't sit there and tell the student what they should be doing. They're coaches. They ask them questions and they empower them to make their own choices. And then, as well as the coaching, we give them those experiences. So, like I've been talking about so far in this conversation, you know, we take them to do outdoor activities in the wild. So our Into the Wild residential weekends are the highlight of my year, where we bring together loads of our students from different schools, and they are working in teams with kids that they've never met before, rock climbing and building rafts and all kinds of things. And it is hugely developmental. I'm sure those of you that have seen some of Sanjay's YouTube videos and stories
I was just about
before,
to say, if you want to know what the Into the Wild weekend's like, I've made a couple of videos about them, explaining them, like, the week after I was there. So they're great weekends though. They're so intense, but amazing, because they make so much impact. I mean, I'm knackered after them. I don't know how you do it week in, week out, some of them, but So go on, carry on.
Yeah, no, totally exhausting, but it's all worth it when you see the transformation that happens in so many of the kids. And then we also give them some other experience as well. So I think social action and volunteering is really important for young people to see how their skills are really valuable to society and how they can help other people. And it gives them that perspective as well, that, you know, life isn't all about them, and that they can do something quite easy to make a real difference. So we do what's called a Play Your Part Day, where the students will go out and do some volunteering. And then we also do another trip day called World of Work, which is where we take them to the world of work, and they go and visit a exciting workplace. Like, we've been to Twitter before, we've been to some of the big corporates in Canary Wharf, like KPMG and EY.
Yeah.
Where have you been, Sanjay?
I've been to KPMG and EY.
Oh, okay. So
you just said them, but those are the two. The World of Work days are really, really good, really fun, and it just gives you like an insight, especially if you're 12, 13 years old, insight into the real world life of what business is like and working like. So it's really fun days.
Yeah, and that day, as you've said, it's just giving them that insight, and it's all about raising their aspirations and showing them those other paths along the way. You could do a job like this. But there are also many other things out there, and you could do all of those as well.
It's almost annoying you haven't got enough time to show them everything, right? There's only so much you could do and do with the students, but it's just it's hard, isn't it? Hard time wise.
But that's why the coaching is so important, because the coaching is there to go, you know what, you went to KPMG last week and you might have had a fun day, but decided, no, you don't want to work in a place like that. But actually through that, you might have learned about what kind of job you want to do. Like, do you want to be a people person? Are you somebody that actually really wants to work in a really small organization and have a bigger role? Or are you somebody that likes the excitement of a multinational and maybe likes to be able to travel? By visiting one place, you start to open up all those questions and all those options. So we're definitely not taking students to places to say you should work in a place like this, but to allow them to just kind of open their eyes and start to think about it for the first time.
Do you know what? Let me just tell a quick story on this. That one of my cohorts that I had, I think it was the first one I had. We went to EY, and I had this student who I was directly coaching. And throughout the whole time I was coaching him, he was like really just not giving me much, not telling me much, didn't want to do much. Bang! As soon as I took him to KPMG, was it EY? I can't remember. One of the two. EY. Sorry, EY. He completely changed. It was literally like he was like, Sanjay, da, da, da. I was just like, another thing. So he goes, oh my god, yeah, that's amazing. Like, I want to do that. I was just like, where have you just come from? Like, this is like, but it's what you're saying, right? Put them in a different environment, give them a choice, show them what it could be, and then they completely change. So I just had to tell that story. Sorry, carry on.
It makes me so happy. you know, and I think sometimes it's easy for us to kind of dismiss it and be a bit like, oh well. And I think because it happens so often as well, this is the weird thing about Yes Futures being as successful as it has been, is that, you know, now we're working with hundreds of kids every year, and I hear these stories all the time, and there comes a point at which it just becomes a bit like noise, and I have to
Yeah.
remember, no, that is a massive amount of impact for one individual, you know.
Unholy
That's
amount. Yeah.
yeah. And it's even like this morning, we on our team meeting, we'd had a message through our website from a student that we worked with 2 years ago, who, you know, I remembered her name actually, but other than that I wouldn't have really remembered much about her, in the grand scheme of the hundreds of children we worked with that year. And she sent a message saying that she, you know, it's 2 years on, but Yes Future has really changed her life and helped her think about lots of things in different ways. And oh my goodness, it was just that reminder again and again of like, it's not rocket science what we do, but it is
So
just
not, is
about
it?
giving the kids that opportunity and doing it in a really careful and clever way where it's empowering them through the process.
I mean, look, I'm all about this is one of the reasons why I put this podcast together, because I just want to get out there the impact that people like you make, right? And to get people to understand where it's come from, the actual roots of it, why you do it, you know. It is a massive thing, and I'm forever grateful that what you do, because I don't know anyone else that does this. I don't know is there anyone else that does these kind of things?
Well, it depends on what you mean. Like, there's
Like
lots
in
of
terms of Yes
organisations.
Futures, like that are not a school provider, but come into schools to make that impact. I don't know of any, but
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of organisations that work with schools, and there's lots that like kind of do tutoring and stuff like that. And then there's also things like the Duke of Edinburgh Award, which you know has really similar ethos to us, but works with older students typically. So, but yeah, as far as I can tell, in the 10 years that since Yes Futures was an idea to what it is now, I haven't come across anything that does quite what we do, and the coaching model being like the fundamental difference there. You know, a school can take a kid to visit KPMG if they got the connections, and they can do some volunteering, and they can even take their students on a residential, but it's that package of all of the support together with the coaching and embedding that self-coaching. I haven't ever come across another organization that does it yet.
I think
there should be. Let's
100%. Could you imagine?
I'm totally open to every single, you know, I want every single school to have this kind of support, and if that's Yes Futures, great, but oh my goodness, if it could just be like 100 organizations doing the same thing, then the world would be a better place.
I always say there's never enough coaches in the world. Like, coaches make such a big impact, so there can never be enough. And I love it when another coach is like, I'm thinking about coaching. I'm like, another person who's great, who wants to make that impact. Same thing what you're doing, right? What you want to make that impact. I mean, look, if there's any coaches listening to this, I mean, I'm a big advocate for what you do at Yes Futures. I think you know that. I've made a ton of videos about it. But you're always looking for new coaches, right?
Yeah.
Always looking for new coaches. If you are thinking that you want to give back, you want to volunteer, you want to help make an impact, and you've got some spare time, reach out to Yes Futures. I'll put all the details below, but reach out to Yes Futures, because I can wholeheartedly say that I hope I'm involved with you for the next 10 years, to be fair. Like,
yes, please.
Some way or another. Like, even if I dip out for a year, I still want to come back. Like, I don't ever want to sort of lose contact, because it is an amazing thing. So if you are thinking about doing it, then from my heart, I've done 2 programs with you. I did want to do a third one this year, but obviously we don't know what's going on. But reach out, just have a chat. It's well worth your time. And you know what? It made a massive impact in me. I remember telling you, actually, I think it was after the Into the Wild, that like just having those couple of breakthroughs with those couple of students, like really massive breakthroughs, made such a big impact on my life. And I was like, it's mental. Like I remember one thing, when you're at these Into the Wild weekends, especially, you completely take yourself out of the world you're in, the busy life, the work life, and you just zone in this whole weekend. And even on the trips and stuff, and even, to be fair, coaching sessions, but like once you're in that zone, like everything else becomes obsolete around you, and it's that in itself is so powerful because you're so present with what's going on, and that's where like the impact really sets in. So yeah, I love it. It's great. Well done. Sarah, any final words of wisdom?
Oh, I can't be put on the spot like that.
Okay, that's
no,
fine.
I just hope that this has been interesting for people to listen to. I think I didn't have any idea what to expect. Neither of us had kind of knew what we would end up talking about, so it's fascinating to think about the journey we went through and the conversation that we had. But I hope that it's been of interest, and great if it inspires some of you listeners out there to come and volunteer with Yes Futures, then that would be brilliant, because we need many more brilliant people like Sanjay to come on board to support our amazing young people.
There you go. You said it well done. Sarah, look, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. If you've got this far and you're still listening, thank you very much. Be forever grateful. I will put all the links below to all of the Yes Futures stuff and all of my stuff. If you want to get in contact, if you've got any questions, then please let us know. And yeah, have a great day. Thank you very much, Sarah. I'll see you soon.
See you soon.
All right, see you later.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Ignite Your Mind podcast. This is a safe place for real talk on discovering powerful stories, talking about mental health, real business journeys, and hearing inspiring stories. Please do subscribe if you are listening to this on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts, and leave me a comment. And more importantly, share this with anyone who you think may take value from it. New podcasts every Friday at 12 p.m. I look forward to seeing you next week.